Welcome back to the Hopeless Hobby Addict. It's been a little while. Today I'm going to dip into the Army Painter Fanatic because I fell for the FOMO. I fell for the fear of missing out. About as bad as I do with Kickstarters, because clearly I really don't need more paint. I have to find more storage at this rate, but it's all good. I fell down a rabbit hole. Took about 3 weeks to kind of go through my process of comparing Fanatic against the various paints I had. So we're going to look at Vallejo model color and game colors, Old War paint, the full beginner set of Pro Acryl. I embarrassingly forgot I even had stuffed in a cupboard. So this was good therapy for me. I've got everything out on the table, shook everything up, touched all my paints, really looked at the colors, and I'll take you through my process and give you my final thoughts. Let's go.
Let's start with a little bit of context. Let's go back in time. Let's say 1983. That was a good year. There was a 10-year-old. He was bored with the plain plastic Army Mini he had. He had built some Sherman tank models and other things, and he wanted to paint them up. So back then, we had high quality tester's paint. You know, that enamel stuff that the longer you paint in the room with it, the loopier you get. Yeah, that good stuff. We didn't have YouTubes. We didn't have amazing painting guides all over the internet. We didn't have options like that, but it was still the best decade ever. And then I took a 35-year break, sadly. And about 5 years ago, I jumped back in and started painting things again. And then I learned about acrylics, so I had to go get the best thing I could get, right? I went on down to Walmart and Michael's and bought the highest quality apple barrel and deco art stuff they had. And then I discovered there's actually some more miniature focused or modeler focused paints, like Vallejo model color. And then after the model color, well, then I heard about this stuff called Army Painter. So I started buying some of their war paints as well and mixing those in. And then Vallejo became game color and they had their new stuff, of course. But then there was speed paint. And we won't even talk about how bad that derailed me for a year or so. But that brings us to today. And the question is this Fanatic any better than what I had? Or have I just added more chaos to my color options? Now, I can't imagine this is the first unboxing you've seen of this because the Google engine is not that kind to me when it comes to my YouTubes. I'm just not at the top of the charts. It's the usual fanfare of stuff in here. You get your little booklets. The booklet's been updated slightly, of course, to represent more of the new products, like the Fanatics and such. And then there's the odd little stickers, of course. Not sure what the deal is there. They did include a little paint stand, and it's cheap, and I hate it, and we'll get to that in a second. It's your standard laser cut, thin MDF cardboard type material, so nothing exciting here. Now right off the bat, seem to be greeted with a fair amount of blue and blue greens, which was then followed by a whole lot of purples and pinks, which I haven't found a whole lot of use for yet, but I am determined to broaden my horizons this year. Yep, they did include a few skin colors as well, but we're going to break out the whole chart here in a minute and see. As usual, they left some big gaps in what you get with the mega set versus where I think they should have given us some colors from. And of course they included yet another paintbrush I may or may not try. I just haven't had great success with their paintbrushes, to be honest, that they included these. I was pretty happy with the yellows and the orange. And did you notice there's a whole empty tray there? Why couldn't we have made this the 60 paint set and tossed the craptacular paint stand? Lost opportunity. Now let's freeze frame here for a second, because this is one of the first things I do appreciate they did with this new set. You notice there is a couple different cap colors there. So we've got now red being wash, which I believe it was prior, the blacks being the metallics, and now they've separated out the effects paints with those green caps. So I did like those changes. The little things. Now you see here, I'm fast forwarding through the build process on this. I tried to like it. I had hopes for this paint stand, but I'll be honest, I wish they hadn't included it. I wish we had an extra useful paint. Gosh, I don't know, paint on primer. There's any number of things they could have included besides this that would have been more useful. And since all the Army Painter sample videos show how amazing the colors go down in a single coat and cover that little black base they're painting over, I had to make a few of these myself to use along the way as testing. So I try not to be too judgmental on their color selections, but just like it was with the Army Painter Speed Paint Mega Set, it always feels like they leave you lacking in a few critical colors because, you know we're going to go buy more of them to fill in the blanks, right? This is no exception to that. You get a good array of blues and blue-greens and, your basic barbarian flesh, couple flesh tones, not too many grays. So when you look at the big picture, this is where we kind of start to see where they hung us out to dry a little bit in a few ranges, right? Now they did give us, granted, 3 from the actual black grays there. But then right off the bat, we were missing the entire, essentially, warm grays outside of the white. No gray matter beige, no variations in there. And those are colors I have a tendency to use, I think, more. But not long after I unboxed it, I realized the biggest glaring thing is there's not a single brown. There's some of the ruddy browns, there's 2 of those, but there is 0 from a color that is probably the most common thing you'd be painting, at least in anything I do, fantasy, adventure, sci-fi. I mean, there's leather, there's wood, there's brown things. So, what the hell? Then we'll follow that up by the fact that you don't even have a true skeleton color. I don't know, I have undead armies, and I have a lot of leather in my armor. There's not a single warm red in here. I'm sure someone sat in the back room and chuckled and said, yeah, as soon as they buy this, now they're going to want to come buy about 10 more paints right out of the gate.
Spoiler. It worked.
So the big marketing push with this new Fanatic version is, of course, their Triads, which Triads to me means 3, right? But they clump them in 6. But I guess the theory is you can grab any 3 out of that row. Math aside, my brain operates definitely in the scope of who they're targeting this product at. I am not an art major. I am not a paint color mix master. And I actually backed a Kickstarter. I don't know if anyone else here did that watches this. You may remember Broken Anvil from the summer of 2023. And they kind of did the same thing. They didn't call them a triad, but they had 5 colors and groupings. So I actually bought the full 40. And they kind of crumbled, but it looks like maybe they're going to deliver, so I don't know. But on top of that, realistically, we've had the Triads in front of us all along. I'm assuming most people eventually pick up one of these little color wheels. The Tri shades on the back next to most of these colors. So you could, in theory, create your own off of that as well with your own paints. But again, Army Painter did some good repackaging here. These Triads, they're visually appealing. You can line them up in your paint rack. You see what you got. It makes sense. It's basic numbers, color ranges. It all just clicks in my brain. This is paint crack for me in that regard. Now for the mixing process, I wanted to be as level as possible, right? Make sure everything's truly mixed, truly well at its best quality, its best mix, its best coverage. So Vortex mixer, these things, I know people will say you're a wimp, but if you've had Army Painter paints, you can only maraca for so long before you need some help. I'm getting old, guys. I needed the help. Okay. And mixer balls. Gotta put mixer balls in everything. Not just the Army Painter. Vallejo. Everything. Worth its weight in gold. Moving on. So I decided on using these little art books. They got like 36 little color swatch squares per page. And they were perfect for being able to write in the make, color, and compare them all on one page if I group things together. There's also a larger size one, this 9x12, and I actually use this like in the Warg Lord of the Rings episode. I captured my formula for the fur, and I also utilize this for testing speed paints over different metallics on the bottom half there. So these are really handy to have if you don't have one. It's kind of your little paint journal, and it's a handy reference when you're looking at something 6 months later trying to remember how you did it. So some of these paints have just been sitting, on the racks and cupboards, like the Pro Acryl, and so it took a while to get everything shaken, mixer balls in, getting everything ready to actually put these little color swatches down and record the data. Then I had to group them and sort them by, as best I could, groupings similar to the Triad chart that thankfully Army Painter provided on their website. I pretty much keep a copy posted on the wall behind me, and then I have a portable blown up 11 by 17 version of it as well. So it's handy to have as a quick reference. But I have hours of footage of this. We're going to trim it back to just a bit. I mean, you get the idea. I put them all down in rows. I try to compare the Warpaint original color right next to the new Fanatic in a lot of cases, just so I can see a 1-to-1 on those colors that have the same name or really look like they align color-wise, even if they give it a new foo-foo name with the new version. And the Pro Acryls as well. What a pleasant surprise. I'm kicking myself for not busting out the Pro Acryl sooner. The bottles, I'm not a fan of the bottle, okay? It's not squeezy. Coverage and consistency, spot on, and I enjoyed testing those throughout this process. So once I got all the swatches done, then I went through and really started eyeballing which ones didn't have good coverage, which ones did, and kind of grouping those aside too to see if I can build out some of my own triads and not have to go buy all 216 of the Fanatic paints, which I probably never will. So in regard to the DIY triads, I just wanted to take an example here. I tried to make my own variation of the yellow triad using the two Fanatics I got with the set, a few Vallejo game colors. Pro Acryl could have fit in there too, but it doesn't really fit in the rack with the others. Not that I'm keeping this particular rack, but my point being, aesthetically, I like the smaller dropper bottles because that fits the size of what's in my rack for the most part. The gamed colors had pretty good coverage overall, so this would be a workable triad if I had to. And you can see they came pretty close. I do like the yellows and oranges with the Fanatic set, so I probably will be expanding on that particular area. You may notice I'm putting little toppers on the paint bottles here too. That's something I kind of got hooked on with the speed paint. It definitely has some presentation that I enjoy. I can easily see colors. I can flick some of the blood spatter on the effects helmet so I can kind of see what the effects paints look like. It just gives me some better visual aids besides just the color chart from Army Painter. I'll put links below to the particular vendor I buy the STL files off if you're interested in looking what he has. He pretty much covers all your standard dropper bottles. Let's face it, painting over black is hard for a lot of colors. I wanted to see a worst case scenario for some of the trouble colors like yellow, orange, red, so I stuck with the black primed model to test them head to head. The second part I was looking for was to find 4 colors that were very similar. 2 being the new and old formula of Army Painter, just to see how they changed between the 2 generations. And Pro Acryl ideally, because I consider that pretty much on par with the coverage, the opacity, the pigments, all those things. When you're looking at Fanatics, the Pro Acryl all seem to score just about equal in my testing. And then finally a Vallejo to fill out the tester. This is about as scientific as my brain could come up with for this process, to be able to show you something, ultimately how I come to some conclusions at the end of the video. You might have already skipped that and got tired of my rambling by now too. So it was kind of hard to determine just how much I was going to show you guys. I'm going to skim through these pretty quick. When I looked at the yellows, the old demonic yellow was workable, but it took a lot of layers. Things that were a large smooth surface were difficult with the old demonic yellow for me. We'll see how I do with the new one. I still have to figure out the thinning and getting some of those things just right. It's a process. When you look side by side with the Pro Acryl versus the Fanatic, which is on the little wooden holder, they're both solid coverage after a few coats. Oranges were a similar mixed bag. The lava orange from the old war paints, well, it kind of sucked, but the new one was great. The orange fire from Game Color was not bad either. And the Pro Acryl orange had rock solid coverage as well, so definitely on par with the Fanatic. Again, orange over black, it takes a few coats, so I wasn't expecting this miracle one and done coverage like they seem to claim in some of the Army Painter marketing. That stuff must be going on pretty thick. Reds are definitely another tough one over black, so this was a good challenge. The pure red from Fanatic and the old version, they weren't spot on. They're not quite what I think of when I think of red too. These are considered a cool red, I guess, in the new Triads. So that was why I was a little disappointed there was no red from the more warm red side of things. The Pro Acryl red is very bold pyro, I believe. So it was a very bright, punchy red. It took a few coats, but we got there though. The greens all had great coverage. I tested more of a normal green that I could find. 2 good ones from the Pro Acryl and the Army Painter Fanatic, just to give them a good head-to-head. Both had great coverage. The Camo greens as well, I tested out some of those. They also had great coverage. I was trying to do slightly thin paints, just being on a wet palette alone added some moisture to them, and I would mix in a little bit more where I could, just to try to give a nice smooth, too thin coat kind of approach to covering this black up. Flesh colors, they were all fairly different. I didn't have anything identical in Pro Acryl. They do have a tan flesh, so I used that. The Barbarian flesh from the new and old Army Painter, and then I just went with a basic flesh tone from good old Vallejo model color paint line, one of my original basic sets I bought. These all took 3 coats to complete. It was flesh over black, so again, not the perfect test, but a good test. There was a purple, and this is a good one to point out when you look at the alien purple here. It has great coverage. It's almost a matte finish, maybe even a satin kind of smooth and silky finish on these new paints, and that seems to be consistent. The colors, I don't know if it's the high level of pigments, but they all kind of look a little dull, matted once they dry. It's just a little different looking from what I'm used to from the old Vallejo and original war paints. Some of those were a little more on the glossy side even. Not much to report on the blues. Great coverage. Pro Acryl great. Fanatic great. The other one's fine. Moving on. Same with the browns. Good coverage after a couple coats from all of them. I use the dark umber from Pro Acryl and the oak brown from the Fanatic. Bone colors, I picked a ivory from the Pro Acryl. That seemed like about the same color as the one that came with the Fanatic set. And then I picked a few other kind of similar skeleton bone colors from the Vallejo and the old war paint line. And you can see white, good solid coverage from that titanium bold from Pro Acryl and from the Fanatic new matte white. Now with the bronze, there wasn't any metals with the Pro Acryl, so I had to venture out. I tried to use a Liquitex bronze I got from a set of those for one of the ones to compare against. The Fanatic bronze looked great after 2 coats, nice and smooth and shiny. The bright bronze from the Vallejo Game Colors, yeah, it almost looks like a gold. It was very bright, very shiny. Apparently I missed painting up the spear tip too. That was with they're just normal metallics. Those passed the test as well. The greedy gold actually went on nice and smooth. I was originally going to compare that against a Liquitex gold, but I actually ended up using speed paint, glittering gold. Alright, so conclusions, final thoughts, my 2 little pennies, my 2 cents. They're good. Fanatic did deliver in a lot of areas. They have great coverage, good consistency. They are still at that reasonable, affordable, I guess, in the grand scheme of things, that $3 to $4 range per bottle when you shop around. Widely available, which to me, that carries a pretty heavy weight as well, because you get these fancy, little, not as, I guess, commercialized, not as produced brands that are kind of niche. But then what happens when you run out of color and you can't get it, So for me, I'm on board, obviously, with Army Painter. I like their speed paints, and I even put up with the original war paints, but now I've seen these new ones. Yes, it's a yes from the Hopeless Hobby Addict. So I will probably continue to grow my range of these. Now, if you have Pro Acryl already and you're heavily vested in it, that might be a little trickier. Outside of the bottle, this is to me almost like the GW pot problem I had with those. This fat, stiff bottle, I just had trouble getting paint out easily. I don't know, maybe I'm a wimp. I'm all for your standard little Vallejo and Army Painter size bottles, and I just feel like I have more control. They're easier to squeeze, easier to get out, and so that is a factor in my consideration. The label, the clear labeling, the Triad system, all those things. It's kudos to Army Painter on this, and I'm saying this, I'm not sponsored, I'm not paid, this was my money. This is honest amateur painter guy opinion here. They're good stuff. I have no problem recommending this to anybody. But again, if you're already heavily invested in Vallejo or Pro Acryl or one of those, just get a couple. Try them out first. Because you certainly, there's a ton of valid like game color colors I'll keep using. There's a bunch of even the original Vallejo model colors that have great coverage, and they're colors that are between the Triad colors, you know, in the reds and the oranges, things like that. So it doesn't invalidate what you got. You can, like I said, build your own Triads out. So get some, play with them. Probably get the starter set, not the mega. Anyhow, I'm rambling. It's good. Get yourself some, test it out for yourself. Let me know your thoughts. What do you guys think? I mean, some of you tested it now. Are you liking it? Hating it? Thanks for coming by. I appreciate you. I've gotten over 400 subs now, so, you know, the channel's growing slowly. And that's great. I want to keep plugging away at it. And I got more Deep Rock stuff coming soon. We've got our expansions coming. A bunch of you just got the game for the first time with the second edition. So I'll be reusing some of these Fanatic paints here shortly. We're due for a redo on the Very Yellow Driller. So that's a good yellow test right there. And then probably a redo on the Engineer video. So we'll work with some reds. So stuff's coming. See you soon.